I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting to order tonight, Tuesday, July 14th, 2020. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Yeah.
Miller,
Here.
Rosado,
Here.
Beck,
Here.
Knopp,
Here.
Chancet,
Here.
Wolf,
Here.
Barron,
Here.
O'Brien,
Here.
Callahan,
Here.
Meitzler,
Here.
Malay, Ewer, Cerrone, McFadden.
Here.
So is that 11 and 3?
Yes.
Is that what we have? Okay. So we have the necessary quorum to conduct business. A reminder tonight to speak directly into the microphone. And something new tonight, we have a microphone stand in the middle of the room for anybody from the audience to come up and use, so we don't have to try to clean the podium off every time in between people. We're just going to have the one microphone up there. The next thing would be items to be removed, added, or changed this evening. Do we have anything? Nothing? Okay. Next up would be matters from the public for items that are not on the agenda tonight. Is there anybody here that has something that's not on the agenda? Pretty confident everybody out there is here for one thing. Okay. Next up will be the consent agenda. Alderman Chancet.
Your Honor, the consent agenda reads as follows. Resolution 20-88-R, approving plat of dedication for part of the 900 block of North Van Buren Street, and ordinance 20-47, declaring certain property to be surplus and authorizing sale thereof. I would move that we approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Okay, motion by Chancet, second by Knopp. Roll call, please.
Chancet,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Barron,
Aye.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Callahan,
Aye.
Meitzler,
Aye.
McFadden,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Rosado,
Aye.
Beck,
Aye.
Knopp.
Aye.
Okay, consent agenda passes. Next up will be item number 6, the presentation by Engineering Enterprises on the Carriage Crest Drainage Study. Marquee item of the evening.
This is Rahat Bari. The Carriage Crest Cresby neighborhood has long standing drainage issues. The stormwater in this area is tributary to an infiltration basin with no gravity outlet. During heavy rainfall or periods of rain or periods of prolonged wetness, some of the residents in this neighborhood experience basement flooding, which can be extreme in some cases. The city of Batavia engaged EEI, or known as Engineering Enterprise Incorporated, to investigate the drainage conditions of that recharge basin that's contribute to the flooding issue. And here is Tim Paulson to present. Tim.
All right, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. Hopefully, let me know if I'm straying from the mic and you have trouble hearing me. Today we're just going to go over our study on the Carriage Crest recharge basin dewatering analysis. We can do the next slide. We're going to first go over a quick overview and our project approach, and then talk about the background of that detention basin, and then survey, the resident survey, summary of the results of that, and then some soil borings that we conducted to help us in the study, and then talk about our stormwater modeling effort in the investigation areas, some of the causes or contributing factors to the flooding problems that we believe are significant, and then some potential solutions, look at some cost estimates, and then some conclusions and recommendations for moving forward, and then question and answer at the end. So the objective of our study was to develop a feasible dewatering plan for the Carriage Crest recharge basin to address the flooding problems that the area residents are having. To do that, we reviewed existing city documents and resources. We conducted a resident survey And we did some soil borings and did soil and water testing, and then hydraulic analysis, looking at a dewatering well outfall, and then a potential gravity outfall to the Fox River. And then we did some analysis, estimates, and recommendations. This is a picture of the storm sewer tributary area to the basin. I'm sure you're all familiar with the area. I don't know if my pointer's quite strong enough, but the basin is in the center there, and the shaded area is the approximate storm sewer tributary area, about 66 acres. So all that storm sewer system collects the runoff during a storm event and takes it to that basin, for which there's no gravity outlet. It's just the inlet pipes. A little background on the basin that we learned through the investigation and with the assistance of the city staff. There's sand and gravel layers underlying the basin and also within the surrounding soils. The basin was constructed over a former dump site, and there was evidence that there was gravel mining prior to its use as a dump. The basin was modified after a property transfer in 1997, where an additional lot was added to the subdivision. And then around 1998, after the 1996 storm events, there's a recommendation to add a pea gravel layer just under the surface of the bottom of the basin to try to help promote infiltration. And then also, we've learned there's possible hydraulic connections to the adjacent sand and gravel layers, and possibly then also to foundations and basements. This is a sketch of the concept sketch of the basin, or it's based on our soil, the survey and our soil borings. You can see it's be on my right, the bottom of the basin at about elevation 704. There's a thin layer of topsoil, and then that layer of pea gravel. And underneath that is the dump material, and then below that is the gravel layer. So we took two borings, one in the bottom of the basin, and in that one there was water in the basin. Water in the boring about 2 feet deep just under the pea gravel layer, which would indicate possible permeability issues with the material that's underneath the pea gravel, the dump material. And in the other boring, which was just outside the basin, where we're looking at a possible lift station location, there was a thinner layer of the dump material and then the sand and gravel, but there was no water in that boring. So there's a possibility that there's some perched water table in the basin area. And then just for reference from the plans and survey information, there's a few adjacent homes to the basin, and what we think is the lowest basement floor elevation is about the same elevation as the bottom of the basin. So if there is some connection between the pea gravel and the sand and gravel layers, there could also be connection to some of the foundations. So the resident survey was done in the fall of 2019. We prepared that, and then city staff distributed it, collected the responses, and got them back to us. We had 60 respondents. About 50% had said that they had experienced flooding, and of that 50%, 43% said that it was in the last 10 years. This pie chart represents the last 10 years from the survey results. So about 3/4 of the respondents had not had a flooding issue in the last 10 years, but that's still, there's just over 20% that did, and 15% that had flooding issues 2 or more times in the last 10 years. This exhibit shows the respondents. All of the shaded lots responded to the survey. The gray shading reported no flooding. The pinkish shading reported flooding, but not in the last 10 years. And then the red shaded areas reported flooding in the last 10 years with the number that's within the lot, the number of times that they reported flooding in the last 10 years. So the survey asked how the water entered the house. It was mostly drains, and most of the things described as other were related to basement flooding, as well as the cracks in the wall and window wells. So the majority of the flooding reported is basement seepage and basement flooding. Now I'd like to talk about the soil borings we did a little bit. We conducted 2 soil borings, one in the bottom of the basin, in the middle of the basin, and then one where we propose a good location for a lift station if we're pumping stormwater. So the soil boring SBO1 was outside of the basin. At the proposed lift station site, there was underneath the topsoil, there's about 6 feet of the dump material, and then sand and gravel material. The soils report calls it, that material is being suitable for a foundation to locate the lift station, and there was no water in that boring. And then the second one in the bottom of the basin, the dump materials there were at a depth of 13 feet, and that pea gravel layer was just below the surface, and we had water at 2 feet below the surface in the boring hole, and then underlying that was the sand and gravel layer again. So a few of the things that we gather from the soil borings and the testing. There's a varying thickness of the dump materials, and I think it filled in an excavation or an old ravine. So in the middle it's a lot thicker layer, and then it's as you go up the sides and get outside of the basin, you have a thinner layer of the dump material, but there is sand and gravel below the entire site and area surrounding, it appears. And the soils there would be suitable if we wanted to construct a pump station. And then for groundwater issues, we found that groundwater in the boring in the middle of the basin, which indicated the possibility of a perched water table within the former dump site. There's unknown, permeability of those soils, but given the fact that that water table in that boring site was at a higher elevation than the bottom of the boring at the lift station site, and there was no water in the lift station boring, gives us reason to believe that water can get through that pea gravel layer, obviously, and maybe even move laterally, but is not moving through the basin, the underlying basin soils at the former dump site as quickly. So that's a possible explanation or contributing factor to why groundwater levels respond so quickly to rainfall events. If the storm sewers are discharging that stormwater into the basin, and it can't infiltrate quickly past the pea gravel, then it builds up in the basin and also potentially is moving laterally through the pea gravel and into the surrounding sand and gravel, and possibly connected to foundations and sump pumps, etc. So for a recommendation on this front for soil borings, which we'll talk a little bit about more later, would be additional analysis to see if we can determine what the hydraulic connectivity is to the sand and gravel around the basin, and potentially to foundations, and then also determine the infiltration potential of that area, if it's possible to do things that could increase the infiltration in the existing basin by connecting to the underlying materials instead of having it move laterally. And then additional, because of the nature of the dump site, additional environmental analysis would be needed to do pumping of the stormwater. So then we conducted a hydrologic and hydraulic analysis. We built an existing condition model from information provided by the city for the storm sewers, from existing plans and record drawings, and then created a storage curve for the detention basin based on information from the city and the 2-foot topography and GIS. And then we had some common assumptions on land cover for a residential area, confirming that with the aerial photos, and percent imperviousness and the various soil types to try to capture how much infiltration there was in the watershed. And then the rainfall data, we started this in the fall and winter, and we were using the Bulletin 70 information. But in April, the Water Survey released Bulletin 75, which is their updated rainfall information. So we confirmed our results on some of the model runs that we were using for our lift station analysis with that rainfall data. So the existing condition model, we broke that watershed into sub-watersheds. It's not a highly detailed model, but it breaks kind of main line sections into sub-watersheds to get the water into the storm sewer, and then route that water into the basin. And then we had, from the basin, no outlet, but assumed storage underneath the ground level for water and infiltration. We ran a series of design storms from the 2-year to the 100-year, from the 1 hour to the 24-hour, and had a critical duration. The critical duration is the event that produces the highest flow for any return period. So the 6-hour duration was the critical duration. So we looked, moving forward with our proposed condition analysis, we used that 6-hour event and then also the 24-hour event, which is kind of a stormwater industry standard modeling event. So the 2-year 6 hours, an intense rainfall where you'd see a rapid rise in the basin, and then the 2-year 24-hour is a more extended day-long event. You'd have a less intense rainfall, but a similar volume of rainfall. And then we ran the 100-year 24-hour when we looked at potentially sizing a gravity outfall to the Fox River. So we set some, design parameters for a potential pumping station. We set proposed invert of the drain tiles based on a previous study that estimated the kind of the normal groundwater level, and in addition, trying, not to pump stormwater but not groundwater. We proposed most of the under drain along the west and north side of the basin that would bring water to the pumping station. That seems to be sort of the direction of groundwater flow in most of the problems, but that would be something worked out in a final design. And then installation of a drain tile would be connected to the gravel layer to make sure we would get that water to the pump station and not have it move off to the side in the gravel layer. For an outfall, we looked at a force main to the existing storm sewer on Crestview outside of the basin watershed, so it's going to a different location and not coming back to this infiltration basin. And then another option we ended up looking at is a force main all the way to the basin south of Crestview near Western. And then finally, we did look at a gravity storm sewer option to the Fox River. So our existing conditions, as we've mentioned, it's an infiltration only outlet. The basin level rises quickly, and there's a long drawdown period. And so then the alternate we looked at, first alternate we were looking at was a pump station with an outfall to the existing storm sewer. And design consideration to that was the capacity of the existing storm sewer, we determined to use a capacity of 1.2 CFS, 538 gallons per minute, based on the gravity capacity of that storm sewer. So there will be times when there's usually going to be a delay in the pumping, but there will be times when there's some water contributing from, a current rainfall event at the time, the pumps would start pumping, so we wanted capacity in that storm sewer without restricting flow into it. So we just use the gravity outfall capacity of that storm sewer. And then we're also going to look at time to draw down and level of protection in terms of storm event, like the 2-year event. So we sized the pump and force main based on that setup, as I mentioned before, with drain tile inverts at 699, the pumping capacity, and the storm sewer connection, and looked at both a 6 and 8 inch force main. And the 6 inch force main had 7.5 to 10 horsepower pumps, and the 8 inch force main 5 horsepower pumps. So for the focus of the analysis, and the cost estimates, we went with the 8 inch force main, lower pump velocity, additional capacity, and potentially lower energy usage costs. So that's what our first alternative was to use that 8 inch force main and pump station. And the results when we run that with the pumped outlet, you have a slower rise in the level of the basin. You have a reduced drawdown period, so you're drawing down the basin quicker. And in that 2-year, 6-hour event, in the model, the peak elevation was 706.75, which, if you recall that sketch at the beginning, the bottom of the basin is 704. So just under 3 feet, 2.75 feet above the basin bottom. And then the time to draw that down back to the basin bottom is 704, was 22 hours. So the significance of the 704 elevation is that's when water appears on the surface of the basin, and that's roughly the elevation that we're estimating the lowest adjacent basement floors are at. So we set that as looking at, that's our level of protection. We want to keep the water from rising above the 704 elevation. So using that existing storm sewer, we weren't able to, it doesn't provide that. So then this is a less than 2-year level of protection system. So we took a look at another, first this is an exhibit of the alternative. You can see the yellow dashed line around the basin would be, potentially where drain tiles would be located, a proposed lift station in the corner, in the southwest corner, out just outside of the basin, and then the red line there is a force main tying into the existing storm sewer. Yes, thank you. We're going to have this, although it doesn't work that well. So then there's a plug in the storm sewer to separate the two watersheds and to prevent backflow from this area during really high events coming back into the infiltration basin. So we would go downstream of that separation between the storm sewer systems so that then it would flow to the west and into that other system of basins. So then after, that was our first effort, and then we wanted to look at, well, what would it take then to achieve a 2-year level of protection or higher levels of protection? So we looked at a pump and force main sizing set, instead of at the capacity of the storm sewer, set at getting the 2-year critical duration event to not come up above the bottom of the basin. And for that, we needed a 2,100, just over 2,100 gallons per minute pumping capacity, and a force main, 14-inch force main, 15 horsepower pumps all the way to that downstream basin. And this would give a 2-year level of protection. You have the peak water level at or below the bottom of the basin in the 2-year events. Increased drawdown. We'd have a quicker drawdown time. I think that's maybe not worded right. You'd have a quicker drawdown time to the control elevation where we have our drain tile set. So at this, you'd have your peak elevation at the bottom of the basin, time to draw down all the way down to our groundwater control elevation in 11 hours, and we would achieve a 2-year event level of protection at that 704 bottom of basin elevation. This is an exhibit showing that same pump station location, but the force main then would run all the way down Crestview until it could go into that downstream detention basin. And that would be a 14-inch force main. So this is a hydrograph. Alternate 1 is the first alternate to the existing storm sewer, and alternate 2 then is downstream to the Crestview Basin. So kind of the bottom of the graph in each case is that 699 where we have the drain tile elevations. And then the top is the high water level of the basin. That 708 is when the basin is full. And then 704 is the ground surface in the bottom of the basin. So you can see the difference in the hydrograph. You can get, with the larger pumps, you start getting the water out of there quicker. So it doesn't rise as high, and then you draw it down a lot quicker as well over a much shorter period of time. And then we didn't go any farther with the pump station analysis because we're at the 14-inch force main, that we're getting to a practical and feasible limit of what you can accomplish with a stormwater pumping station in this kind of situation. So in discussion with city staff, we thought to look for what possible options exist for a gravity outfall, and that would be to the Fox River. So in this case, we have a design parameter of setting a basin invert down at 700. So we'd have to excavate out the basin and line the basin so that we could take advantage of then that full 8 feet of storage without overflowing the basin and having a storm sewer we could construct that would then take the 100-year flow to the Fox River. And we would have to line the basin so we would make sure we're containing the water within the basin and not allowing it to move laterally into the sand and gravel layers adjacent, because we wouldn't want, that kind of investment and then not being sure that your water would stay contained where you want it to be heading. So unfortunately, in looking at the existing storm sewers downstream, the elevations wouldn't allow us to connect to any of the existing storm sewers. And then, although possibly parallel to the existing storm sewer downstream or combining with an existing storm sewer. So it would be 24-inch and 48-inch storm sewer sizing in the model for a concept design. So with the gravity outlet, we can contain the 100-year event within the basin. And with the excavation of the basin lining, it would remove possible connection to sand and gravel layers. You'd have a peak release of 15.93, top elevation of 708, and that's when the basin is basically completely full. If you're familiar with it on the east end, there's kind of a walkway or a little bridge over a culvert. So it would be right up to that level. That's about 708, the top of the basin. And the time to draw down, 27 hours. And that would provide a 100-year event level of protection. There'd also be the option to integrate connections into some downstream areas that don't have storm sewers. As you can see, possibly on this, exhibit, so we'd have the gravity outfall as a 24-inch storm sewer, and then along Chavanaugh here, where there are no storm sewers, you could provide some drainage benefits to that area. And then you connect to a large storm sewer here. You could either run a parallel line or a combined new line down to the Fox River. And that would provide your gravity outlet and your 100-year design protection. So just to briefly do some comparison, the existing, the modeled 2-year elevation is at, the basin full. This is without pumping. I know in the existing condition, the city has some temporary portable pumping they do when there's water in the basin. With the pumping station to the existing storm sewer, we limit that and improve the drawdown time. With the pumping station to the downstream basin, then we can get a 2-year level of protection estimated based on the model that having the water not come up above the ground. And then with the Fox River outfall, we did the 2-year and the 100-year 24-hour events. And then the 100-year event, you'd have the basin full and the water releasing to the storm sewer, or to the river through the storm sewer. But I did want to, share this with you, an exhibit of potential flooding depths. So in the basin, there's some areas on the topo a little below 704. So the yellow areas are those areas. And then the green areas is the area between 704 and 706. So that's when you have 2 feet of water in the bottom of the basin. So you see the basin footprint is full. And then there's some low areas in the park that might start to show ponding water. And by the time you get the basin full at 708, the red area is elevations between 706 and 708. So by the time you get the basin full, you'll have potentially ponding water throughout the park site in some rear yards and in the roadway from the surcharging of the storm sewer. So you would still have, that happening even with the gravity outfall. With this, but it would be for a very short period of time during only the very largest events. Whereas currently, and the 2-foot topo doesn't always pick up the lowest spots. There'll be inlets in these rear yards that may be a little lower than the topo is suggesting. So that's why when you get a couple of feet of water in the basin, people start to see water coming up in the backyards, and you start to see the streets not being able to drain because of the surcharging impact of the nature of the way the basin is set up, as the water level goes up and the elevations of the storm sewers. So this is a summary table with our concept cost estimates. The lift station force main to the existing storm sewer with the less than 2-year event. Our concept estimate for that is $604,500. With the larger force main and all the way to Crestview with the 2-year event protection, concept estimate is $879,000. And then the estimate for the outfall storm sewer to the Fox River is just over $3 million. That would include, excavation and lining of the basin and construction of the storm sewer.
Tim,
Yes.
this is Andrea. Can you just clarify these costs as to whether or not the design engineering and construction engineering are included in those numbers or not, so everyone is aware?
Yes, that includes the design and construction engineering, and I believe it's a 10% contingency on the cost estimates. So I just wanted to, for reference, the May 2020 event, which we're all familiar with, because that event happened as we were just wrapping things up, but it made a lot of things make sense with what we were seeing with the soils, and we did some rework based on that, and I think we learned quite a bit about how things function or potentially function with that event. So this is observations at the official records at O'Hare for those 2 days, May 14th and 17th, over 3 inches of rainfall. they're both very close to a 2-year, 24-hour rainfall event, which is 3.34 in the new Bulletin 75 State Water Survey publication. And then that 5-day period at 8.2 inches was a 25-year, 120-hour event, almost exactly a 25-year event. So in that case, and just looking at the way, the basin was modeled, this would estimate that with this, the spacing between the two events, that our drawdown time of 11 hours on a 2-year, 24-hour event, a 2-year, 6-hour event. So, we were estimating that that alternative, the 2-year protection pumping alternative, could have kept the water levels below the bottom of the basin for that series of events in May. There's also some possible other mitigation options to consider, either in conjunction with the pump station or standalone. Some of the residents, some pumps discharge, directly back into the basin, and it's possible to find a way to reroute those to prevent that from recirculating. Possibly a force main system that would allow connections so that the sump pumps that are pumping water could tie into the force main as well as the city's pump if they had the pump, instead of having residents pumping water into the basin to be pumped by the city's pump to the force main. So that's a possible option to look at if design moves forward with the pumping station. And then other options would be to look at a possible liner or cutoff wall across that gravel seam or another connection, specifically along the west side of the basin. If that's determined to be a significant factor, with additional investigation. Another idea would be to look at increasing the infiltration capacity of the basin, possibly with dry wells or other connections of that pea gravel layer into the underlying soils to help it move down instead of laterally. And then another option, like with the Fox River, outfall would be a liner across the entire basin and then pumping, but without the capacity of the gravity outfall, you would have situations in less than the 100-year event where that basin would then overflow above the high water level. So in conclusion, just looking at we studied the Fox River outfall, significantly more expensive than pumping, but it would be more effective and reliable in the most severe storm events. And there, additional mitigation measures should be considered no matter, what goes forward, because even with the pumping scenario, you're going to want to look at those hydraulic connections that may exist to the surrounding groundwater table, and potentially then to some of the basements. And recommendations then would be to do a comprehensive analysis of the soil and groundwater conditions to get a better understanding of the recharge characteristics of that and infiltration capacities of the basin, how they could be amplified if possible, and then to identify connections to the sand and gravel layer and foundations so that they can be effectively designed to cut off those connections. And then a full environmental assessment so you know what kind of permitting issues there might be with pumping stormwater from the dump site. And then once you have that, you can do a more detailed assessment of the costs and level of protection for any of the permanent mitigation options versus the current option of the portable temporary pumping, and you could have better confidence going forward with one of the design options that you have eliminated the possibility of the connections, so that once the solution is implemented, you'd have a better confidence in that, and you have a better ability to compare the cost once you know all those connections and what it would take to eliminate those. And with that, I'm open to questions.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Alan, I got one. When you were talking about running the storm sewer down Chabanal Trail to the river, would that be a big enough pipe there that if there's one area that potentially could be adding some additional opportunity for development, and it's on that picture there, it's right next to that yellow box there. It's the backyard of the novitiate on North Batavia Avenue, and there's a very large area back there that's undeveloped. And I've had different people in here over the years talking to me about doing things on that. It would be a residential use, obviously.
Your Honor, can you use the mic, please?
Oh, it'd be a residential use, but it would be adjacent to that pipe. So I just wonder, would it be easy to drop that sewer from that area into that pipe? It would be past, wouldn't be impacting these folks because it would be to the east of where they are, so.
You know, that's not something that we looked at. We just modeled the sizing for the outfall out of the basin, but, you know, that's something that could be looked at. It might impact slightly, you know, the size of the storm sewer required and the
That's what I was
cost.
going to suggest, that, you know, as long as we got maybe somebody else who could help pay for this when that area gets developed, that would be a source of probably putting in a bigger pipe, but which could also help the folks here, that you'd have a, you know, larger pipe there for everybody to be dumping into, and then we could get, because there's some people that I think are going to be in here one of these days wanting to develop that area back there.
It's certainly, you know, potential that could, you know, be investigated. So.
Could you just explain like the two-day event, like, so people can understand what it is that you're saying? And, you know, you have, I mean, when we talk about this in the past, we've talked about like 10-year model and a 50-year model and a 100-year model.
Yes.
So
this-
can you do that in relation to the
Yeah.
two-day event?
Well, if I said two-day event, I apologize. I misspoke. I've been talking about the two-year event,
Okay.
return
I'm
event.
sorry, okay.
So that is obviously a smaller event than the 10-year event. Now, with the pumping stations, we didn't evaluate above the two-year event because at that point we had a 14-inch force main, and we were kind of at the practical limit for, you know, what's supposed to be a small stormwater pumping station. So we did, you know, initially run 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, 100-year events to, you know, establish what our what events we should be looking at for the design requirements. But we could not, with a pumping station, we couldn't achieve higher than a 2-year level of protection in a reasonable fashion, at least.
I think what he's asking is, could you explain
What is it?
what a 2-year event,
Right, thank you.
essentially 50% chance of occurring?
Oh, I apologize then. Yes, so that's the event you'd expect to occur once every 2 years, or statistically, there's a 50% chance every year that event would occur.
So, and I think I understand that, and I've been saying this for a few years now, is that, you know, most models are on, I think, a 10-year model that was established in '87 or something like that. And I keep saying for the city of Batavia, we need to start establishing a model maybe on a 50-year event, because maybe it's just me, but I just happen to see that the events are a lot more intense and a lot more accumulation than just a 2-year model or a 10-year model. The 100-year model, it seems, is coming once a year. And so that's my concern, that if we put something here and we're just doing it on a 10-year event or a 2-year event, even with a 14-inch force main, we're not upsizing enough for the future, because, I mean, I just keep saying, and maybe I'm just blowing in the wind here, but, you know, if climate change is upon us, you know, we are having warmer climates. And with warmer climates, there's going to be more rain, and I keep saying it, that we need to prepare for that and not put in for today. I mean, maybe I don't make sense, but that's just what I'm
No, that,
pushing there.
You do, Mike, and Tim mentioned but probably didn't go into as much detail. The Bulletin 75 is the latest rainfall data. So previously, for the 100-year event, we were at 7.58, and I think with the new 100-year event for the Bulletin 75, it goes up to like 8.28 or something like.
8.57.
Yeah, so it increases a good amount, and that's what he used for calculating all of this.
So, and I know dollars are involved in it, so you just can't say, let's put in piping for a 100-year event. There's costs involved.
So that's what we looked at with the Fox River outfall, was to provide a big enough, what would the take to provide a big enough storm sewer to provide the 100-year event protection? And so that was the, the analysis that was looked into in the estimate for the Fox River outfall.
I think that's a safe bet. It's an expensive bet, but it's the safest bet because we don't have to worry about piping, pumping, maintenance on pumps, electric failures during a storm. So it's just let nature run its course.
Alderman Wolf, this is Gary. Can I make a comment?
Go ahead, Gary.
Thank you. Tim just kind of mentioned it right there in the end of his comments, and as did Alderman O'Brien. The options presented this evening for pumping with a force main provide relatively little protection from a storm duration standpoint. If the goal is to provide as much protection as is practical, obviously the storm sewer, of the options presented tonight, the best option is the gravity outfall, but that also is a factor of 3 times the cost. So we need to look at kind of, all scenarios. That's kind of why staff is recommending, to go forward with another study where we look at different options, see if we can identify different options that may provide that same level of protection, but at a less expensive price. So doing more soil boring, doing more soil analysis, looking at some of the environmental issues, hopefully we may be able to find a less expensive that can still provide a good level of protection. Or after the next study, we may come right back to you and say that the only feasible option is the very most expensive one. So I just wanted to say that, and then I'll mute myself again now. But thanks.
Thank you, Gary. Dan?
And I just want to clarify then, Publication 75 then takes into consideration that we've had like a 10-year event each year for the past 5 years in a row.
So what it does is, it's a statistical analysis like the previous one was, but the previous one, I think, stopped somewhere in the late 80s.
Yeah.
And this brought it up through, I think, rainfall records of 2016. Took a couple of years to do the study. Maybe it was 2017. But yes, they added almost another, I did math here, 30 years of data of more recent data to what they had before. And then they also did some bias rating so that they weighted the more recent data more heavily to try to account for the increasing severity of events we've been seeing.
Got it. That makes me feel better. And Mike, to echo your remarks, I agree that we shouldn't be planning for 2 and 10 years. We should be pushing out further than this. So the 100-year is not necessarily the Cadillac that we think it is.
Abby?
I had 2 questions for you. First, well, thank you so much for this overview. My first question was about the first 2 options that pump it to the Crestview and Western basins. Are we confident that those basins can handle the extra capacity and we're not just pushing water problems kind of to another area that's going to flood those neighborhoods over there?
We are, fairly confident, but we didn't do a detailed study on that because we're looking at, the 2-year events, so those ponds would not be full in that type of event. And as well, there's a delay, somewhat of a delay in the pumping. Mm-hmm. So you move the initial flush of the runoff through the basins, and then we're adding to it with the pumping. I mean, if we were talking about pumping 100 years, which event, which we're not able to do, then you'd worry about that basin was already full. But I think with, what we can look at with the pumping, we're we're not concerned about that at that 2-year event level.
And my second question is about the perched water table. It sounds like maybe the dump materials might be creating kind of that impermeable barrier there for a lot of this water to go down. With the dry wells, you know, if we investigated these other options, the dry wells that would kind of try and get underneath that to let water get down, is there more that we could do to remove some of that impermeable material that's down there and create just a better basin in general?
That's, you know, that's.
If I could, I'm sorry, Tim, can I jump in?
Yes.
And Abby, I think, Abby, you're getting at exactly why we're recommending the next study, and that is to further understand the question that you're asking.
Okay.
At this point in time, we have a single point of data in that one soil boring and cannot confidently make a recommendation based on one single point of data. So by doing more borings and better understanding the layers that are below the surface, we should be able to better understand your question and answer it.
Awesome.
Okay, who's next? Joe, did you hit your hand up? Shannon had the same question. Okay.
Can I just ask why there were only 2 soil borings made?
That was the.
The initial scope of this project was to really look at different options for the outfall of the basin. We all kind of went in with the thought process that this is going to be a pumping solution. That's kind of the process that's been in our heads for the past decade. And you know, once we had the soil boring data, and we began to understand, as Tim mentioned right at the very beginning of this presentation, that the spring storm event helped us to understand even better how the basin works. And so kind of as we began to put the pieces together through the course of the study, we began to kind of have this understanding, Mike, that we're going to need to go back and get more soil boring. So if we had today's understanding at the very beginning, we certainly would have done more soil borings, but I think that this has been part of the iterative and learning process.
Thanks, Gary.
Anybody else on council have any questions? Joe?
If we do take additional soil borings, would that be the time to analyze the material to determine if we've got something that is going to involve IEPA rather than waiting down the line to look at that? Is that something that can be analyzed at the next stage?
Yes, so I don't know if Gary wants to comment on that, but yes, we would recommend you do the environmental assessment of the soils and the water that you might be pumping to determine any permitting requirements.
I think we'd also have to know that too, if we were going to discharge that into the Fox River. So I'm sure that all feeds, you know, in a row. That has to be answered first, I think.
Which is another problem then, right? Because if it is severely contaminated, we can't put it into the Fox River.
Well, in this case, you know, our concept model would be to excavate the basin and line it so that all the stormwater goes into that lined basin and you're just releasing stormwater. There's no connection to the groundwater. You'd have to, you know, haul, if it was contaminated, you'd have to do special measures to haul off the soil that you excavate. But once you're built, then you're keeping the stormwater separate from the groundwater.
I think now we're going to turn this over and have people from the public that I'm sure are here waiting to talk about this if they want to come up and make some comments. Okay?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Alan, it's Mark. I just want to let you know I'm here.
Okay. Let the record reflect Alderman Ewer has joined the proceedings. Okay, I don't know if you guys have somebody you want to designate as a spokesman or if you want to take turns coming up.
Well, I'll give it a start, then there's a couple people that might chime in after that. Folks, thank you for your time today. My name is PJ Fitzpatrick. I live at 1075 Parkview Drive, and representing tonight pretty much the 150 households that are tributary to the Crestview Basin. Many of which, as we saw in the survey, experienced some challenges during these events. And many of the people that are here today, I mean, maybe a show of hands who has already experienced these problems. So I think our purpose here today is, you know, in addition to Tim and EEI and their study, we're kind of putting names and faces, even though somewhat masked, to this study, not just dots on a map. Also, as you're deliberating, I think our ask is that we know that there was money for the next phase of engineering in the budget, and because of various budgetary reasons due to the pandemic has been on hold, and we're asking that we kind of reauthorize the money for the phase 2 engineering, as well as you're deliberating for the 2021 FY budget, that we look to fund some solutions for this problem that's been going on for 12 to 15 years. I guess just to give a little bit of an overview or perspective, for me, I moved to 1075 Parkview in 1998. We bought the place, fully understanding that in '96 that there had been a flood and that there was water in the basement at that point in time, but recognizing that 1996 was a pretty historic time, and if anybody that was around here then, it was a pretty historic event, so you could kind of understand how something like that would happen. Then in 2008, a very, I'll call, unique event occurred. Our sump pump ran for the first time. So we'd been living there for 10 years. The pump never ran, but in 2008, it ran for the first time, and then the ejector pump ran, and it was a very unfortunate event for us, but a learning curve and something we thought was kind of unique. It was it was a pretty decent rainfall event, and we thought, well, it's just kind of what happens when you get that kind of rainfall. During that event, in collaboration with the city public works staff and the engineering staff, was when we developed this existing pumping situation that we've been doing now for several years in terms of moving a plug and doing manual pumping. It was something that, I guess, in my mind, and maybe some minds of some of the residents around there, we thought was, again, it was a unique situation, and it was probably something that we may not ever have to do again, but it solved that problem at that point in time. Then came the spring of 2009, the spring of 2013, June of 2015, May of 2018, May of 2019, and May of 2020. All of a sudden now in the last 10 years, this isn't a unique event anymore. This is happening way too frequently. And in the recent event, I think you will find, in just different conversations we've had with the neighbors, the impact and the footprint of this is starting to expand to the point that there are homes that have never had situations before that actually took on some water during this event. So something's going on and something's changing. So I guess my point there is it's not unique anymore, and this idea of an infiltration basin as a best management practice in a residential subdivision is starting to become not such a great idea. In terms of impacts, I think we all could get up and share some stories of the impacts. One of the things, and talking to Jeff here earlier today, and he's been living in the area much longer than I have, is a groundwater situation or an infiltration issue is something you can't see. Tim had the exhibit up there that showed where it might flood if it were 708 or 704 and 706, and you can see that. When it's groundwater, you become a slave to your sump pump, because when it starts coming up, you don't know when it's going to stop. And when it really starts coming up, that's when those extraordinary measures that I know a lot of people in our neighborhood have to basically implement, are being there at your house so you can throw another pump in or watch another pump. My house, in addition to the sump pump that's in the pit, in addition to the ejector pump that it seeps into, I typically throw in an additional 1-inch pump in each one of those pits. Now we're talking about 4 pumps, and they don't keep up. They don't keep up with the groundwater. So you're there constantly watching and monitoring. So when the poop hits the fan, you're moving some stuff around and getting ready for that. Different extraordinary measures after the 2019 event. I, like some other people, I had heard some anecdotal things about some industrial-sized pumps in homes and stuff like that, and so I made the move and added a kind of a dual system, 2-inch pump system to increase my opportunities of protection. And I believe it worked in 2020 because it was the first one to start running. But during the event this year, in addition to the 4 pumps that were running before, those 2 pumps are running full on. And eventually I had to borrow another 2-inch electric pump just to keep the water level down below 3 inches in the basement. So I would call those extraordinary measures. Other impacts are the duration, how long it lasts. You know, you looked at the graphs up there. I think back in '08, and I mean, we're talking days. If the city hadn't stepped in and done some of the manual pumping that we're doing, I don't know how many days or possibly weeks we would have been waiting for this groundwater situation to subside. At least taking that pressure head off or taking that piece off was less than the amount that was going into the groundwater, and it allowed us to start to catch up, and the duration was less. But a kind of a point of, you know, this year I talked about putting that new pump in terms of durations. On the 15th, I believe the storm was on the 14th. On the 15th at 5 o'clock in the morning, my new pump system started running full on without cycling, so running 100% at 5 o'clock in the morning on the 15th, and didn't cycle once, ran full on until the 28th of May, 1 day short of 2 weeks. So that's just one location, and I know there's some other people that have experienced some different things. So those are just some of the primary impacts that we've experienced. You know, some of the secondary impacts are different things like homeowners insurance. You know, at first your premium goes up a little bit, and then your deductible goes up a little bit, and then your limitations of liability are peaked. And then, I know for me, and I think for some others in the room, after a 30-year relationship, you're not renewed. And then you're out on the street trying to find insurance, you know, to meet your mortgage requirements after you've been dropped already, and they see your history. That's kind of a difficult task. And then the final kind of secondary impact, you know, as properties have taken on water, our properties have become somewhat stigmatized until something gets done, because we have to disclose that we've had that water in our basements. And in terms of being able to try to, at some point in time, sell them or the value of your house, you have to disclose that. And so it's kind of put a little bit of a stigmatized tag on our properties. So with that, I want to turn it over to Jason here real quick. He's got a few more slides and stuff, and then I'll step up and, you know, take any questions and maybe close it with, you know, our final ask.
Before I get started, I want to thank the committee again. Appreciate the time. I want to especially thank Mr. Chanzit and Mr. Meitzler for coming out and meeting with us. Mr. Chanzit multiple times, thank you again. Your ear was very much appreciated, as well as your guidance, so thank you. As PJ just mentioned, we're both members of the community. I live at 1101 Crestview Drive. I've got nothing like what PJ's experiencing here, but I'm going to show you some slides that kind of lay out what's going on here. So if you can go ahead and...
Can we get your name for the...
Jason Lindstrom.
Thank you.
So there's our park here. You know, what's really concerning about this, the next couple of slides, is so, you know, we've got a basin that fills up, overflows into a park, you know, and it's built over an old dump. So, you know, stormwater by nature is contaminated. So all that water then goes into the grassy area. If you go to the next slide, it reaches out with multiple fingers out into different areas. And if you go to the next slide, it sits also right in the playground area. So as a resident with small children, 10 and 8, I can tell you my kids love this park. They love the woods where the basin is at, but we've had a lot of questions, and we've changed the criteria for what they're allowed to do now because of what's going on there, the dynamics of that park. So, and obviously we also keep them away when the water's at this level, but as PJ mentioned, this is every year now. You know, last year it happened a couple times. This year we're fortunate. It hasn't happened as many, but the magnitude of this recent event certainly hit home and allowed for these pictures to be taken. So, you know, this is what we're living through our park. You know, dogs, kids, adults, you know, we enjoy it, we love it, but under these circumstances we can't even go near it. So next, please. The plug was brought up by EI, and I appreciate that, Tim. You know, the plug is an interesting concept because in most counties, you're not allowed to plug a sewer line. You know, I know for a fact in DuPage,
the guidelines specifically say you cannot restrict the flow to zero. We all understand that, you know, it has to be done to protect us from the marsh, and the green box is roughly where that plug goes typically, so that the marsh and anything west of us doesn't back up like it did in 96. So we accept that, you know, and then we all flow into the basin. But what happens is when the basin's full and the city has to come out and pump to help PJ out and others, they move that plug. So this past May for that 5-day event, where 25-year, whatever it was, that plug was never in its intended location. So as a resident concerned about the marsh backing up, concerned about our basin filling up, you know, we didn't even have the plug in the right spot. Now, you'll see over the next slide, when the plug is moved to allow the city to pump, which we understand why they need to, this is what we live through at that intersection. So the entire intersection's full. It's reaching up into the parkway. Our backyards are full. You know, this is the mess we're dealing with when our basin fills. You know, along with the park being filled and properties taking on water, there's many here that represent, once again as well, the water issue. So, you know, our properties are forced to hold the water. Our sump pump systems are pushed to their capacity. You know, they're either going off continuously or at very high rates. I can tell you mine was going off 3 to 4 times a minute, which that equates to over 4,000 cycles per day for almost a week. The stress, the anxiety, what we live with under those circumstances, I can tell you I don't sleep good. Many here are actually taking on water. But I've heard it too many times where individuals have said, well, your pump's running, it's fine. Okay, but under that condition, it could fail at any time. You know, even with a battery backup, you might have 8, 10, 12 hours of battery backup. Under those circumstances, if the power went out, you've got maybe 4, maybe 3. There's not unless you go with that house generator, there aren't backup systems out there that can support what we're experiencing for a lengthy period of time. We really need help. So if you want to go ahead and go next. There's a picture recently, you know, the water's got nowhere to go. It doesn't go down into the storm sewer system, the groundwater system. It just bubbles right up, it goes right back down to your foundation. You know, and we're all living through that at a minimum, or we're taking on water. Next, please. This is my neighbor just across the street, the Browns, 1100 Crescent Drive. Through all the discussions with everybody who's known, everybody who's lived in that house has never taken on water. Well, under these circumstances, with the pumping, the flooding, along with the basin fill, their pump failed during this episode and took on water for the first time. Next slide. Once again, neighbors, 1080 Pontiac Drive, they live right next to PJ. Cruises, right back there. The honor of also speaking for them here, but once again, with their pumps running, they're taking on water. You know, they've got systems in place, they've got contingencies and backups there, they're still taking on water. As PJ said, the next slide, he's got multiple systems. He still can't keep up. So pumps running, you're living on the edge. In some cases, pumps running, you're still taking on water. We really desperately need your help, and we thank you again for listening to us tonight.
Thank you.
I guess just to close out our presentation tonight, unless there is anybody with any comments, again, I do want to thank, and Jason, Jason, you know, obviously Dan and Elliot have been good. I did want to mention, you know, Gary who's on the line, and Andrea and Rahat are here, and Scott Haynes and Bill Kellum. Your staff has been great people to work with throughout this whole process, going back to 2008 and all this. They're out there, they're on the front lines, they're listening, and so we really appreciate all their efforts to date. So I guess to repeat kind of our final ask, not kind of, I mean, we would ask that we restore the next phases, whether it's more soil borings and getting to final design that can move forward this year once they wrap this study up, as well as, you know, you're getting ready to start deliberating for the 2021 budget and trying to figure out a way to get some construction money into the 2021 budget so that we can get this thing built, that we can put in place a sustainable solution, the protection that the boys from EDI are talking about, and that those sleepless nights that Jason are talking about go away. We thank you for your time, and I guess I had an ask, so I guess if there's any questions you all had before I turn it over, I'm here and willing to answer any questions as well.
Thank you.
My name is Jeff Kruger. I've been here since 1988. I live at 686 Blackhawk, so I've experienced this for as long as anybody here. And just to reinforce, which is very well said by both gentlemen, I've got 2 pumps in my main sump pit. One is rated at over 4,000 gallons per hour. It runs nonstop. And to reinforce exactly what they're saying, there is no backup system, no battery backup system, no whole house backup system that can save that. People have said, why don't you get a whole house system to back it up? 10 to 20 seconds, my basement is flooded. That's how fast the pit is filling. Within 2 or 3 seconds, that pit is completely filled and up without 2 systems in there. One is a 4,000 gallon an hour and a backup system, both on their own pipes directed outside. So I've been living with this for over 30 years. I keep hearing that was an exceptional rainfall, or this was an exceptional rainfall. What seems to occur is that we're getting more of these exceptional rainfalls, and things seem to settle down in between those rainfalls. And what was so well said here is those rainfalls are coming more often. The flooding is coming more often. And it seems like we're just not making enough progress. If you don't live in the home here, if you don't live in this neighborhood, you don't get it. That first 96 flood, there were carp out in my street. And people 3-4 blocks away thought I was lying when I said, come see the fish in my front yard, right? The whole yard was flooded. They went around the neighborhoods and it wasn't so bad till they got to our neighborhood. And it's the same way with this. Unless you live it every day, unless you sit there and watch your pump, hoping it doesn't fail. I have 3 backup sump pumps that I can drop in at any time to save my basement. It failed this last May. I incurred several $1,000s worth of damage. You gotta be there, you gotta watch it. It's not good. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Adam Blodman. I live at 976 Robin Drive, and just wanted to put a face with the issue that we're having. Just to give you some background, my wife and I, we moved to Batavia last year. We bought our house in March of 2019 because we have a 1.5-year-old now. We moved out here just to get out of the city, and we like Batavia. It was a good spot to be. It's unfortunate that we have this issue because when we bought our house, it was supposed to be a dry basement. And I believe the people that we bought it from, I believe that when they were there, they might not have had any issues. But you fast forward, in this past May, we definitely had water for the first time. It wasn't inches, and we're fortunate enough like the other people have had. But just to give you our story, we want to finish our basement. So when we moved in, we spent $1,400 with Bulldog Plumbing because we wanted to support Batavia businesses to put in a new sump pump. So we had that, a battery backup put in, and we thought we were good to go. So we also then said, oh, well, we have a couple cracks here, let's fill those. Another $660 later, $2,000 into our basement, and you know, we're well on our way to having a finished basement one day. So then this May comes around and we have this issue, and I'm looking in the backyard, and it's funny because if you went back a few slides, the greenhouse in the back of that picture is mine. And our 1.5-year-old runs around that park every single day. Keep going back, it's one of the first pictures. So, yep, right there. There's my house. So, yeah, just to put a face to the name, you got a 1.5-year-old running around in that water. Kids were playing on rafts for days back there. It was just like a pool, so. We did recently, since we had that issue, we called Premium Waterproofing, which is another Batavia company, and we spent $1,800 to have a deeper basin put in and a 1/2 horsepower sump pump, even though we just spent $2,000 last year. We had to have the concrete jackhammered up, and that now must have loosened one of the cracks, and we got water coming through with not even heavy rain last time in the corner, which is where we did not have water before, so that was another $400. So now we're a little over $4,000 in on our basement, what was supposed to be a dry basement. And just to provide some perspective, as a quick Google search after I saw that, the minutes from August of 2019 have the mayor saying that it's a known issue for years and years and years and years. So my main purpose while I'm here is just to get, and just to reiterate, he hit it right on the head, 2021 budget funding. I understand that $3.1 million that was shown up there is probably a pretty big price tag. But I'm not sure if that's a all-in one-year cost or if that's spread over multiple years. But just from an organic spending point, as much as you can fit in to keep this project moving along is all I'm here for. So that's my request, and just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Tony Drosky. I live at 1017 Winnebago. We've had, thank you. So we've had 5 floods since we lived there in 2002. And this last one in May, our insurance canceled. And high-risk insurance is, okay, our insurance isn't cheap already. It's $2,400 a year. We're done. We spent so much money on that basement. We have 4 sump pumps, a backup. This is our second generator because we went with a bigger one to keep everything going. We burned through some pumps at $375 a pop. We have 2 or 3 on the side all the time. They don't last. It's not Zoller's problem. It's the water moving through our house. We live kind of kitty corner from the park. Our daughter lives behind the park. We hear all this pumping going on all the time. The day that it flooded in May, our backyards were full. I called the city. They said they're pumping. I'm like, it's happening. I could hear the water moving under our house. It was like, it's going to happen tonight. And sure enough, it did. So we just really need to see some major help here because we can't sell our house like this. They're going to know, so we have to wait 3 years without a claim. That means 3 years from May to get back on normal insurance. And then it's still on our record for, what do they say, 7 years? 10 years? We don't even know if we're going to be, when. We were planning on selling the house in like 3 years. But no, that's out the window. So please, consider all this and what we've gone through. Because we're like at $100,000 of damage. From insurance, yes, we have, but now we don't anymore. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I know we've gone through this a couple different times in different spots in town where we've had other issues, not the same exact type of issue as this, but there have been times in the past where, we've done the little things that we can do on it. I think, Gary brings up a great point, what he said earlier, that the next step in this is to try to figure out by more investigation, more soil borings, what would be the right thing to do with that? Is it open the pit up, make a bigger retention pond for it, or whatever we have to do to solve that? Is it bite the bullet, figure out how to bond out for the money, go out, build a giant water main out there so then we could possibly connect into something else at some point? Or looking big picture into the future, do we want to try to put a main all the way down there? Realize for everybody that's out there in the audience, when we've had this issue in other places in town, you have to start at the other end of the project because you can't start making the water main on the west end of it to try to get it to the river. It starts at the river and works out. So if this becomes a multi-year project, it's going to start at the other end of it to get to you. Because if we don't have any place to send the water through, we can't have the system hook into it. So it may be something that doesn't happen immediately. So realize we are going to try and figure this out. I think, and Rusty, you can chime in on it, but I think what we have to do is we have to take that next step. we have to figure out how to fund that, try to get that done this year, if that's possible. I don't know, that's probably Gary or Rahat could answer that. To try to see if we can get that done so we can move as quickly as we can to try to solve this. And realize that, you know, I'm not your alderman, but I have heard lots of stories about this. I have seen the floods out there. I have driven through them. So I understand what's going on there. I didn't have the fish swimming in my street when it flooded in '96 in the brand new house we moved in. We had the neighbor's dogs swimming down the middle of the street. So, you know, I understand what's going on there, and this is an issue that, as Mike has said, is just getting worse and worse every year. So we will have to figure out how to do something about this.
Alderman Wolf?
Gary, go ahead.
So tonight represents the end of what we call the preliminary engineering study, and monies were included in the 2020 budget to move into what would typically be called the Phase 2 or the design engineering study. But as we've discussed tonight, we still have more investigation to do. So I would recommend that the monies that were originally going to be used for the design phase be implemented and utilized immediately for this continued investigation. And then after that, we would move to the design phase. So there are funds in the 2020 budget that, you know, officially were supposed to be for design and not investigation, but I think we need to use those funds for this investigation phase and move forward. Those funds were put on hold, but obviously City Council has the authority to release those funds for moving forward.
That's an excellent point Gary's making, and I would definitely agree with that. I would think, I don't know if it's feasible or not, and I like to fix things correct the first time, but maybe there's something, as Tim was saying, you know, there's the $600,000, there was a solution that wasn't the best solution with some sort of forced main. Is there maybe a temporary fix just to lighten some of the load? So as opposed to, say, 8 inches in the basement, there's only 2 inches in the basement. I don't know.
Yeah.
But just do something now just to kind of stem the tide before we get the study done and we start looking for resources and revenues to address the problem.
I'm worried about a game of whack-a-mole, though. Like, if we
Yeah,
do a fix, do we create another problem?
Right, and that's one of the things that scares me about moving it off-site, pumping it into another basin, is the issues that we've had elsewhere in town. I don't want to move this issue 3 blocks away from where it is now. I want to figure out how to solve it, and I think we'd be better off putting that $500,000-$600,000 or whatever that temporary or not such a great idea situation would be into the real solution. And I think if the real solution is creating a main that can be run to the river, and it's feasible to do that, may take a little while, but if that's the right solution, that's, I think, what I think we should do.
Well, and I fully agree with that. I just think that could be 3 years, 4 years down the line. And some of these people appear to need immediate addressing.
And it's going to rain
take care of
before
it.
that.
So,
Yeah.
Alderman Wolf?
It's going to rain a lot before that.
Go ahead, Gary.
If I could hop in. I mean, let's take this from an aggressive but realistic time frame, and that is that we could use the funds that are in the budget this year to do more investigation. By the end of the year, we could know, you know, what the options truly are, and then move into design, and we'd have to move into permitting. Now, just to realistically set the expectations, design and permitting could take most of the year next year, depending on how complex the permitting issues are. But potentially by the end, close to the end of next year, if not for sure by the following year, we could be under construction. It doesn't necessarily have to be 3 or 4 years out. So it could be as quick as, say, 18 months, I would guess, 12 to 18 months that we could be under construction.
Gary, this is Andrea. Just from my experience with Area 3 down further south, that Alan has been referencing without saying, I had to do both. I had to get the permits to discharge into the river and to cross Route 31. Getting the discharge point there was already something there. I'm not sure, we'd have to investigate if there's something there. It made it a lot easier with that, and we were able to move pretty quickly. IDOT was the bigger holdup. But I think we started, that was a June 15 event. By October of 17, we were constructing that outfall. And I
That's
think,
kind of what I'm wondering. Is it roughly the same timetable?
yeah, so council moved pretty quickly on that, to give us the authorization to go ahead and do the studies of that area from the backups, and that's kind of where we're at, and we're in the final phase this year.
So Gary, is the only thing holding you back, two aldermen asking to release those funds?
For immediately moving forward with the additional investigation, that's correct.
Would you care to make that motion?
I would ask that Alderman join me in releasing those funds so we can begin the soil studies.
Meitzler, second.
Thank you.
So do we think we can have that, and I don't know if that needs to be a resolution or how you need to do that. We could move that to council.
I'd confer with Peggy on that, and
Great.
exactly what needs to be taken from a budgetary standpoint.
Okay.
It's technically in the budget. I would go on a limb a little bit and say that it's really more of a policy matter because you decided as a policy to put those funds on hold. Those funds have already been approved, and again, I'll go on a limb and say if you change the policy and say those are no longer on hold, that we could move forward.
And I believe that the dollar amount is roughly around $40,000.
Because I would like to expedite this because I think we owe it to the residents for the decade or more that this has been an issue out there to try to get this going as fast as possible. Thank you.
And we do need to at some point have a discussion regarding the pause button that we pressed.
Right,
But
and I think
out of that budget, 40,000 is not a substantial.
Right, but I think that may give us the answers, okay, do we need $2 million, $3 million, $4 million? And then it's gonna be determined on 14 of us to figure out how we get that, and then how do we pay it back? Because I think that's one of the questions we wrestled with
Yeah.
Ward 1 and with Area 3 to try to do stormwater sewer separations and the stormwater work in Area 1 that needed to be done, and rather than year after year after year do little tiny bits of it, we decided to do it the way we did it. And I think that may be the situation we really need to do here.
Alan, this is Elliot. Can I ask a question here?
Sure, go ahead, Elliot.
Yeah, just I'm absolutely in support of releasing those funds, and certainly to the point of getting Gary the information to the additional investigation. Can we get a rough timetable of when we could start that, when we could expect to see the results of that investigation? Because I don't want to make this seem like we're just going to go and perennially study this area, which I don't think we are. But I want to make sure that we're giving the residents a date as to when they can expect to see the next round of results and get some definite action coming out of those.
I think realistically, we're going to be dealing with soil investigating companies and environmental companies and a consulting engineer. I would be more comfortable in saying by the end of the year we'll be able to have another presentation like we did tonight.
Okay. I know it might not be the exact answer you wanted, but we're going to try and move this forward as fast as we can. We do realize, anytime people have water in their basements or, any other issues like this, it's a quality of life, and that's really high up on our list of priorities. So we will get going on this as soon as we can.
Alan, once engineering has moved forward with all of this, we can update our website. This presentation will be on there as well, and so we'll just keep residents up to date.
Okay.
And they can follow on that page.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I know you guys already have a great relationship with your two aldermen, so they will also be the conduit to help you with, answers as we move forward. Abby?
One more quick question. I wanted to double back on what Mike said about how climate change is upon us, and that the fact that wetter areas are getting wetter and drier areas are getting drier. This is absolutely textbook, cause and effect of climate change. I taught Environmental Studies 206, Introduction to Climate Change, when I was in grad school, and and this follows the timetable exactly. We break down that semester into cause, effect, mitigation, and adaptation. And what we're talking about tonight is very much adaptation. We are adapting now to the effects of climate change that we're seeing and feeling and experiencing and paying for in a very real way. And so we can only expect it to get worse and worse as we go on if we do not address the mitigation aspect of the climate change puzzle, right? So we know the causes, we know the effects, we're adapting, but we have to start as a city also looking at mitigation areas that we can address climate change and try and, reverse that tide. And it's why I harp on a lot of our transportation issues here in town, and it's something we should look closely when we talk about energy. There are things that we can do as a city that try to alleviate this for future generations so that, the next couple, hopefully my kids, when they stay in Batavia, when they move into this neighborhood, that, they're not experiencing these issues too. I swam through Carriage Crest Park in '96 because that was fun, and now I look back and I'm like, oh God, that's so gross. I'm not your alderman, but I live nearby and I remember it and I've seen it, and apologize for the struggles that you've seen. So that's my call to all of us.
And as an engineer, although you guys may go in the floodwater, I would advise against it. You do not know what's in there. There's dog feces, there's electric that could be live, and that is extremely dangerous. So for all those kids that might be playing and rafting, suggest, even if they are not yours, to get out of there for their own safety.
Okay. And I just want to thank the residents that came down tonight and talked, or just the ones that showed up tonight. We do appreciate when you come in and you're right to the points that you want to make, and just showing up and being here and letting us know, we're not all your aldermen, but we are all your aldermen. So, thank you. Okay, we will now move on to item number 7, which is ordinance 20-44, proposing the establishment of special service area number 66 for the Mill and McKee Retail Center. Let's see, Marty's not here.
I'm here.
Oh. Hello?
I'm here.
Oh, you are here, Marty. Thank you.
Yes, this
is yours.
Ordinance. Is it working?
I can hear you. Speak up.
Okay. Yeah, this is ordinance 20-44, establishing SSA 66, which is the Menards retail center at Mill and McKee. I'll go ahead and have Drew explain the timeline for this so that we can get working on this one.
Sure. Thank you, Alderman Callahan. If you recall, we approved, or the City Council approved an ordinance for the planned development of Menards in June. So in that ordinance, there was a condition of approval that would require the establishment of a backup special service area for the relocated detention pond. This detention pond serves the Mill and McKee shopping center, which is basically bounded by Mill Street at the north, McKee at the south, and Randall along the west. The current pond is owned by the Owners Association. The Menards would basically be taking over the responsibility of maintenance once this new pond is in place. So this special service area is a backstop in case those particular entities in some way fail to maintain that pond. A special service area could be set up for multiple uses or multiple activities on the property. However, what's being proposed is just for a backup for the stormwater detention area and its related improvements. So there is a process specified within the ordinance or within state law that does set up the timelines, and there was a schedule in the packet for you. And essentially, this would get us to a public hearing on September 21st once we've initiated this ordinance or approved this ordinance, and that sets up the process to do notification and so forth. So we are recommending approval of this draft ordinance for consideration, and then if that's approved, it would go to the next city council meeting on the 20th. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Drew. Anyone have any questions on this one?
Nope, I think it looks pretty straightforward.
Pretty much a slam dunk.
Is there anybody in the public that's wanting to talk about this one?
No one here.
I move we approve to City Council Ordinance 20-44, proposing the establishment of Special Service Area Number 66, Mill and McKee Retail Center.
Second, Meitzler.
Motion by Callahan, second by Meitzler. Roll call.
Callahan?
Aye.
Meitzler?
Aye.
Ewer?
Aye.
McFadden?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Rosato?
Aye.
Beck?
Aye.
Knopf?
Aye.
Jansit? Wolf?
Aye.
Barron?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
That'll be 12,
11.
11, I'm sorry, 11, and 2 absent at this point. Alderman Chanzit has left the proceedings. Okay, next up would be item number 8, ordinance 20-38, amending text to the zoning code for cannabis establishments and employment districts. Alderman Callahan?
Thank you. This was back on March 24th. The Cow unanimously granted this back to planning and zoning for further direction on cannabis business establishments, some of the guidelines in the employment districts. They went through and had their meeting and came back with several recommendations. Drew, could you outline those for us?
Certainly. So this draft ordinance before you tonight would amend the employment districts chapter to categorize several different uses that were implemented by the state licensing acts for recreational cannabis that are basically industrial business-related uses in terms of creating cannabis products and shipping products and so forth. So with the review that the Planning Commission and recommendation that the Planning Commission made, they proposed that these uses, if they are to be permitted by the city, be conditional uses only in the general industrial district, and that there be additional standards implemented for locational requirements that these locations would or businesses would have to follow. In terms of the location requirements, what was proposed is a 500-foot setback from certain uses, and those uses were public and private schools, daycare facilities, public parks, churches, cemeteries, and residentially zoned property. Also, residentially zoned or residentially used properties that may not be zoned residential. They also established a number of performance standards. Those include one regulating odor that basically requires that no odor be detected from these uses at the property line. The second, we do have a industrial noise standard, and the Planning Commission proposed that these businesses need to follow the noise standard that we have in place for industrial to residential. The next item within the ordinance would be that there's a prohibition on signage having cannabis or cannabis product paraphernalia on signage. And with the conditional use process, the code would stipulate that essentially the applicant would provide any documentation that they would otherwise provide the state for their licensing application. So that includes items like security plans, the ventilation plan, the procedures, and how they would dispose of cannabis so that animals, children, the public in general can't access it. So the one other change that I do need to highlight is that the proposal would also move cultivation center, which is a currently permitted use in our zoning or LI and GI districts. It would make it a conditional use in the GI district, consistent with those other cannabis uses. The ordinance would also prohibit the sale and consumption of cannabis. We do have the referendum that's pending regarding recreational cannabis sales in town. This particular regulation would have to be changed if that was the action that the City Council wanted to take after that referendum. The map that is on the screen in the council chambers shows a map of which properties that are in the GI district, which is the dark gray properties. So those properties colored gray are GI district properties that would not be allowed to have a cannabis business establishment. And then the properties in green would be those that would be allowed to have it. The one other item that I neglected to mention in my report or during my presentation, but is in the report, is that the Plan Commission also required that cannabis establishments not be located on strategic regional arterials or arterial roads. So that would eliminate Kirk Road and Fabian Parkway. Any property that fronts those properties would not be included. So, as I mentioned in the report also, there is no timeline for this that has to be followed, but you could, if you do approve this, it could be on the City Council agenda for the August meeting. And as I noted, the governor issued an executive order that did delay the license issuances for these businesses. So there is a little bit more breathing room in terms of how quickly the City Council does have to take action on this. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the ordinance before you tonight as presented.
Thank you, Drew. Question on the arterial roadway. Has there been any input from Chief Ewell on that question? Would they want them? Because I know in the signage it says they can't really advertise it, but has there been any input from Chief Ewell on that portion as to whether or not they would prefer or not prefer it on a major roadway?
Not on that particular item. That was something that came up during the discussion in terms of the Plan Commission was kind of looking to try and regulate as where these could go in terms of having higher visibility. So it was more a direction of the Plan Commission. I do not have specific feedback, though, from the chief regarding whether that's preferable or less desirable from a law enforcement standpoint, monitoring and so forth.
Yeah, maybe before council, we might want to ask them on that, just for, would it be easier for visibility for enforcement, on that? Just a question to ask for him to the council.
Certainly, I can contact him and make sure that, or have his opinion presented to you with if it goes to council or if it continues at another COW meeting.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Abby?
I have a question. This is for the production. This isn't a growing center. This isn't a big greenhouse, right? This is production and manufacturing. What are the steps along the line?
So it applies to all of our cannabis related businesses, but not for dispensing or for consumption.
So it would be.
So it
we
would
already
be
have the
cultivation
growers.
centers, it would be craft growers, it would be infusers, and it might be a transportation type of company. So any one of those uses.
And why cemeteries? I'm just clicking through the list of things. I mean, some of them I get kind of makes sense. Back in the day, there used to be, limits on where you could put a bar. You couldn't have it next to a church or a school either, which this seems very reminiscent of that.
Yeah.
If we're limiting odors and noise to the property line, why the long list of things it can't go by?
Yeah. I'd invite Drew.
'Cause I looked at another ordinance.
Or if Scott is still
and-
on.
And they did not have as many restrictions. I feel like this came in with a lot of restrictions, and then we start getting the perception of we're not a friendly community because we have so many restrictions to bring a business on. Residential
Yeah,
zone
just jump in on that.
properties, like, I could go and buy some weed and go smoke in my house. So.
Yeah, let me jump in that real quick. This is Scott here.
Yeah.
There's a couple things. One, the cemetery was kind of a last minute ask by the Plan Commission. So I think they just felt that it was a related use to churches, so that's why they wanted to eliminate that. But the other thing was some of these uses are very similar to the uses and setbacks that were in the original medical ordinance state law that was in medical setback, so mirroring that to an extent.
Then maybe we look at the medical also.
So
No, some of that's regulated by state law, where you have to keep some of these uses away from residential schools, that type of thing. That's part of state law and the medical law.
Yeah, I think that was, Jennifer, that was your point, is we kind of mirror medical, correct? And not add more for this. Is that my understanding of what you were saying?
Well, I think that, one of the ordinances I looked at in another community, they didn't have so many location restrictions. They didn't even list residential on there. And, yes, I think that if we're going to have the two establishments, we need to look at almost mirroring them. So then maybe we do need to look at the medical and also review that in this process too.
So I would be surprised if another municipality did not have a restriction on how close a cultivation facility could be to a residential neighborhood, because there was actually a lawsuit about the cultivation center down in Aurora by another municipality who wanted to have that cultivation center located in their town, because they made the allegation that it was a violation of the statute, how close that cultivation center was located to a residential neighborhood. So a lot of these things are driven by the state law, and that we don't have any ability to not abide by in our own code.
But as far as this goes, and Scott, you could correct me if I'm wrong, do we use the same map that we've got up here right now? Is that the same map that we use for the grow facilities for medical? Where
They were allowed setbacks from residential.
we can't hear you, got a lot of feedback.
Oh. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep,
Yes.
go ahead.
It's not exactly, but mirroring it to an extent.
Because I would be okay with anywhere in the general industrial area, if that's what we have. I mean, I don't think we have to exclude the major highways there or arterials, because I think that there's very few places that are available for that type of business on those roads. And I wouldn't
Right,
want
and to throw that in there.
I mean,
It's like restricting, like you can only have this
Yeah.
one little corner.
and if there's a property that maybe is a smaller unit or something that somebody would fit into, I think we're restricting that.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, I don't have a problem with leaving it as the general industrial without making those restrictions of what's in gray. And I don't think I don't know that we have to have the cemetery thing in there unless that's in the medical one, because I don't think we have any property that's anywhere close to a cemetery that fits the other part of it.
If somebody owned land in that general industrial area and decided they wanted to put a cemetery in there, and we already had a cultivator, would they be allowed to put a cemetery within 500 feet of a cultivator?
What is the permit process?
But that's a valid question. I mean, it's no different than the adult uses, where we have certain setbacks from different types of uses. So if somebody comes in later on and puts in a school, then yeah, you'd be restricted.
Okay. So I would say that restriction has to work both ways for all of these businesses listed.
So I guess my question would be, do we want to leave the ordinance as is, or do we want to remove what I'll call those the gray restrictions? Get rid of the gray area.
some of those gray areas are probably approximate to, in residential up there, if I'm picturing it right? Like, maybe some of them are residential, but.
The backside of what's on,
The west side?
Yeah, the west, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, the western area of some of the general industrial does abut up to some residential, I believe.
right, and those, I guess, that would be where that restriction, I think,
There's
makes
a-
sense,
Yeah,
and I would leave that alone.
yeah. I'm with you.
So say leave F and G.
This is Drew. Why are we treating this any different than the medical cultivation centers that we already are already permitted uses? And it's all manufacturing. It's basically just for a different end use.
I don't think.
I don't know why we're like.
Drew, I don't think we should, and that's why I think we should remove that restriction on there, and it should go by what the state statute says as far as how far it has to be away from residential, and not, and not over and above what area we've decided, or, you know, commercial district that it fits in the industrial district.
Yeah, I think we should mirror the medical with deference to the, whatever the state law says.
So, Scott, can we change that and move it to?
You can do whatever you want. I mean, it's up to you guys as to what restrictions you want to have or not, so.
I don't want to hijack you here, Marty, but I think that would be an amendment I'd like to see made to the approval of this tonight to move it to council. And the other thing I think is, yes, we're kind of waiting on what the governor is going to decide on that. We also have a referendum out there to decide other uses for cannabis in our city. I think this is something that we need to get completed, so that way when the governor does decide to move forward with, or the legislature, whoever makes that decision, state level, that we are ready to look at, or people will be able to look at our properties that are available for this use and not be trying to do it after the fact.
Right, and I agree with that fully.
We've already been in that situation once, and I think that cost us a possibility of any type of facility for growing in the community. I think this is something that we do have a possibility of locating one or more of these facilities in our town. So I think this is something that we need to get done.
Yeah, I agree that it should mirror the medical cultivation center. Scott, and my question was along, there is a little bit of difference with these types with noises, et cetera. Is that not one of the concerns as to why this was slightly different than a cultivation center?
Yes, that's part of it. Yeah, because we don't know exactly how these facilities are going to be making noise, or various types of manufacturing activities are going to happen.
And on that, and regarding that, I think that the only thing that we should add in there would just be the noise, which would be the already existing definitions that we already have.
Right.
I do have a concern where it says odors. That's very subjective, and I don't think that that applies for anything else. I know other businesses produce odors, so what's offensive, what's not?
Well,
I think that's too
I would
vague.
say that the odors we do have some concerns with, because, I mean, if you look at Papa Nicholas, when they were there, we did get a lot of complaints about their smells, and Party Light, we also got complaints about their smells as well. So, it's not just the marijuana, it's just the odors in general.
So,
Right, and that's where, should that be something different where it's a little more quantifiable than just no odors from?
If I could answer that, Alderman Callahan, there really is very few objective odor standards. There's a few devices that can measure for certain types of odor, but as a whole, it's a very difficult item to regulate from a measurable standard. So that becomes one of the difficulties where, based on a complaint, we would have to investigate and see if basically a common nose can detect the odor. So that's why we're using, or why we, at least in terms of proposing a standard, do have use it at least at the lot line.
Okay. Alan, this is Mark.
Go ahead, Mark.
With the odor, we had talked about that with that grease trap business, that if they have offensive odors, that they're probably going to have to do something about it. So I think we would have to still try and figure out the same standard, because again, it's in the nose of the holder as to what's offensive and something that would need to be corrected. So I don't have an issue with it in there. I just don't know how we regulate it, to Drew's point.
I think the overlying industrial district has the odor standard in it, does it not, Scott? Or
No, it
Drew?
does not.
It
No,
does
it
not.
does not have any odor
I think the
standard.
way that it's written leaves the city with the discretion
Discretionary,
to be
okay.
able to determine whether or not the odor is detectable at the property line.
And I think that would
Yeah,
be,
and
I
we're
think
not-
that would be something
we're not
like
gonna-
we did with the last permit that we did
Yes.
for this, or conditional use that we did. That's where we get the authority to say, okay, if there's a problem with it, this is what you're gonna have to do, and we're gonna be the ones that are gonna tell you have to do something with it.
Exactly.
And that's why I think
Exactly.
the conditional use part of the permitting process here is what we need to make sure we remind ourselves of, that that's something we have oversight on every time we allow one.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
It would be interesting to see how those, how controlling the odor that emanates from the property line squares with the requirement to provide the state the ventilation plan to get the odors out of the building. Part of the license for the state is you have to get the odor out of the building, but part of the permit for the city is you can't have it escape your property line.
Filters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody makes
You
a filter
state-
for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's filters that you can put into these systems. I mean, just like restaurants, I had a situation with a Burger King once that people didn't like the smell of, cooking burgers, and so, you had to have some type of a scrubber system that was in there and keep that odor down.
There's ways to do it.
Incense and peppermint.
So, Alderman Callahan, would you like to make a motion on this?
Yeah, I'm going to make a motion that we approve to City Council Ordinance 20-38, amending the text of the zoning code for the cannabis establishments and the employment districts. We would be removing, Alan, which ones did you want to remove?
I think it was A through E, perhaps, and then also the part regarding the adjacency to a strategic regional arterial.
So that would be removing under H3, A through E. And which one is the streets?
That's in the paragraph. That's in the main paragraph there, so we'll have to amend that.
Okay, and then amending the paragraph for going into adjoining streets.
Yes.
Is that clear, Jenny?
As long as Scott gets that changed in the
Well,
ordinance
it's
that comes
Ellen.
before us at council,
But, yeah.
and that the clerk has it down on her notes, we're all good.
I think I can figure it out.
Okay, I think we understand, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we'll review it again when we get to council, so we make sure that what we ask for, we get.
Exactly.
Yep.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Motion by Callahan, second by Knopp. Roll call.
Callahan?
Aye.
Meitzler?
Aye.
Ewer?
Aye.
McFadden?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Rosado?
Aye.
Beck?
Aye.
Knopp?
Aye.
Chanzit?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Barron?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
12 yes.
Okay. So that passes. Okay, next up would be item number 9, approval to reject bids for the 2020 self-contained leaf collection trailer. Just as it reads, pretty straightforward, simple memo. I don't know that, unless anybody has any questions. If not, I'll make the motion that we recommend to council rejecting bids for the 2020 self-contained leaf collection trailer.
Second.
Motion by Wolf, second by O'Brien. Roll call.
Wolf,
Aye.
Barron,
Aye.
O'Brien,
Aye.
Callahan,
Aye.
Meitzler,
Aye.
Ewer,
Aye.
McFadden,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Rosato,
Aye.
Beck,
Aye.
Knopp,
Aye.
Jansit.
Aye.
Okay, that carries. Next up will be Resolution 20-91-R, authorizing purchase of one 2020 Ford F-150 truck from Morrow Brothers Ford for $28,670. This is for a truck that was wrecked.
Yes. Totaled.
Okay, totaled. And was scheduled. to be
Alderman Wolf?
Go ahead, Gary.
Yes, it was scheduled to be replaced next year. Was totaled about a month ago. The truck that we're requesting permission to purchase is actually sitting on the dealer's lot. Ironically, a year ago, similar truck in wastewater was totaled, and we had to purchase a state vehicle that took over 9 months to receive. So by getting a vehicle off of a dealer's lot, we're able to obviously expedite the timeline tremendously. And this is a heavily used vehicle, so that's a key consideration. I gave feedback, so I don't know if you guys, how I could help
I think
here.
one of the
Hang
things
on.
that could help with feedback is if anyone who isn't talking, if they put mute on their phone if you're calling in. I think that helps the feedback.
And I think it
situation.
just changed. It sounded like it just clicked off whatever
Okay,
was
good.
on. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, so the only thing that I did want to bring to council's attention is that this is sitting on the dealer's lot, and it contains approximately $2,000 worth of equipment that we typically would not spec. You'll notice on the list, there are power windows and power locks, and there's fog lights. So those are items we normally would not spec. So we have to weigh the fact that we are receiving a settlement from the insurance company, and we are receiving this truck immediately because it's available for purchase versus the added cost for things that we typically wouldn't purchase. And if we didn't purchase those, though, we'd probably wait 9 months to get a new truck. So that's why we're recommending moving forward at this time.
Anybody have any questions? Joe?
Do we have money left over in a 2020 budget that'll cover the cost for this on a project that didn't come in at budgeted price?
So I'd say in general, I mean, but this is a general fund issue, and it's not budgeted in 2020. So this is going to be a vehicle that's completely not in the 2020 budget that we're needing to repurchase this year.
But you do have, if you look at general fund items that we have in the hold category, totaled more than $400,000, okay? And of that, we've approved the bike share program for $13,000. So there's certainly, among those items, could be a trade-off there.
Okay, thank you.
And in the 2021 budget, we will not be requesting this truck, obviously. So the savings will come back again next year in next year's budget. It'll even itself out.
I'll watch for that.
I see the big smile behind that mask, Joe.
It's like, oh, be careful. Don't
Joe
say
just
that.
wrote that down, Gary. You're going to have to prove that to him in a couple of months.
Well, I'm just buying the truck this year instead of next year. That's all.
I think, again, it's something that we have to do, and this is the truck that's
Exactly.
available.
Yep.
And if we don't, I'm just guessing it's going to be just as much money next year if we were to wait to that or try to use, I even thought there's some of the trucks we're getting rid of or cars we're getting rid of. Do we swap that out for now? I think, it just got accelerated because we had an accident with it, and we've got the full value of the truck. We're not trying to wholesale that next year to reduce our cost on it. So it probably is a wash. It just has to happen this year.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll make the motion that we recommend to council resolution 20-91-R, authorizing the purchase of one 2020 Ford F-150 from Morrow Brothers Ford for $28,670.
Second.
Motion by Wolf, second by Rosato. Roll call.
Wolf.
Aye.
Barron.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Callahan.
Aye.
Meitzler.
Aye.
Ewer.
Aye.
McFadden.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Rosato.
Aye.
Beck.
Aye.
Knopp.
Aye.
Janset.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. Okay, next up would be resolution dash 20-90-R, approving statements of work between City of Batavia and Fermilab for construction, lease, and maintenance of certain fiber optic infrastructure. Alderman O'Brien?
So we, probably in 2010, thereabouts, 2011, we put some infrastructure in the ground throughout the area from Route 88 all the way through to Cherry Park and other areas. Fermilab is looking, we have a master service agreement with Fermilab, and they're looking to use some of those dock conduits now, and it'll go from Route 88 to the Cherry Park substation, to the Cherry Park substation, to the Southeast substation, to the Nouts Road substation that is on the property of Fermilab. They're looking to do it. They'll pull their own fiber optic, but the City of Batavia will maintain it. There are two master service agreements. They're looking to fill two, I should say, statements of work, number 5 and number 6. It's pretty standard stuff. That's about what we have. Any questions? Gary, did I leave anything out?
No, just, again, this is in support of the upcoming science at Fermilab. They're looking to get new fibers in place to support their upcoming experiments. These are items number 5 and number 6, because we already have work items 1 through 4 with them, and the rates are consistent with what we've charged to other government entities.
So any questions, concerns from anyone? Comments? Okay, I will make a motion. We recommend City Council passage of Resolution 20-90-R, resolution approving statements of work between City of Batavia and Fermilab for construction, lease, and maintenance of certain fiber optic infrastructure.
Second.
Motion by O'Brien, second by Knopp. Voice vote, please.
All in favor?
Oh, we should probably, roll call, excuse me.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Callahan.
Aye.
Meitzler.
Aye.
Ewer.
Aye.
McFadden.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Rosato.
Aye.
Beck.
Aye.
Knopp.
Aye.
Janset. Wolf.
Aye.
Barron.
Aye.
You can probably put that on the consent.
That could go on consent, and I think the truck purchase could go on consent as well. The rejection of bids has to be on a regular.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think Alderman Wolf, because the truck purchase is his item,
Okay.
it probably has to go on a regular agenda so that you guys can take action on it.
You are correct. Thank you. Okay. Up next would be item number 12, project status. Laura?
Sure, I just have a couple of things. Wanted to let everybody know that the Kane County Bike Share Program that was approved at the last City Council meeting is expected to launch on July 31st, 2020. We had a planning meeting last week with Kane County, with Colony, the company who is providing the bikes and the support services with the bike program, as well as all 4 communities who are going to be the inaugural members of the Kane County Bike Share Program, to include Elgin, City of Batavia, Montgomery, and the City of Aurora. And all of those communities are planning to bring the program online on the same date, which will be nice because then there'll be places for us to travel to and between each other's communities. We all felt like that was a very important thing. Also, Kane County informs us that we, 4 cities, are going to share the rebate that was afforded to Kane County. And for the city of Batavia, that means that we'll be receiving a $7,000 rebate on the program. So the cost of the program for this year and next year was $13,000 each year. But this year, we have $7,000 coming back to us that we can choose to use in any way. It's basically gets deposited into our general fund. Our initial cost outlays will include the purchase of a bike rack to hold the bikes, and so Scott Haynes is procuring that for us now. We're going to get a rack that has 10 slots in it. We are contracting for 7 bikes, but we're trying to accommodate the fact that we're going to be such a draw that we're going to need more than 7 slots in that bike rack. So I hope there's going to be a ribbon cutting event that's going to be at 10 o'clock a.m. on July 31st. So encourage any and all of you to join us if you have time available. In community and economic development, we have issued outdoor dining permits and licenses for 19 different establishments in Batavia, and we've got 9 others that we are working on right now. You approved the SSA for the Menards expansion today, and we are continuing to review their building and engineering plans. This is going to be sort of a multi-phase expansion for them to include creation of the new detention pond, as well as building of additional space for the store. We're really incredibly glad that Menards decided to expand their current store here in Batavia. The property at 916 Park Street, we've had the exterior cleanup completed except for a few small items, and we're working on contracting with an environmental remediation company to determine whether any of the interior materials require environmental mitigation in order to do that before we demolish the structure. We're also continuing to work on matters related to the One Washington Place project. The redevelopment agreement is being revised, and we expect that the planned development ordinance will move ahead with the RDA to COW simultaneously at a meeting in early August. In Public Works, the water main related work has been completed on Prairie Street, and the project focus will now shift to storm sewer, pavement, curb and gutter, and sidewalks. The project is on schedule to be completed this fall. Significant traffic impacts this week at the intersection of Batavia Avenue and Main Street. That's to facilitate installation of the new storm sewer, sanitary sewer, and water main throughout the intersection. And NICOR also continues to work on new gas service lines at the west end of that project. In Ward 1, that storm sewer project is nearing completion. Restoration milestones like reinstallation of individual mailboxes and those types of things are ongoing. And Public Properties and Services and our Streets Department continue to provide support to downtown business owners with outdoor dining efforts. We noticed that our electric circuit was out for some of the uplighting that was on our street, and so we've corrected that issue. In addition, we'll be looking at other possible lighting issues there as well. And then also we have designed sign that we hope to be up by this weekend that will correct the issue that you couldn't tell that there was public dining there. So working with Main Street, we've come up with a sign that welcomes people to North River Street for dining, shopping, entertainment, and so hopefully that will give a lot more visibility to that area as people are driving by. So
that
they take
signage would be
notice.
on Wilson Street,
Wilson
facing
Street.
east, facing west.
Yes. on the Wilson Street side facing south, right?
Yeah, south and north.
Yeah.
It'll be on
Well, one
River.
face, when people heading west will see it.
Yes.
People heading east will see it.
Both ways, yes. And then also, the Water and Sewer Division is commencing work to submit an application for grant funding for lead water service replacement. And that's all that I have, unless you have any questions for me.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I had the opportunity to go with the mayor and Jeff and Rhonda over to that property on Park Street. I'm glad it's going away. We walked through before we went into the house, you cannot imagine how much stuff was outside. But after the contractor went and cleaned up the area and got everything, it looked like it was mowed, I counted 86 tires stacked up waiting to be hauled off. One piece of property, 86 tires stacked up outside. So I'd imagine the neighbors are quite happy that that's being taken care of.
Yes.
It was incredible. I've never seen anything like that.
And it was nice that we had grant funding available to assist us with that exterior cleanup effort, because you can't believe how much stuff was there. You can't believe how expensive it is to hire somebody to clean up and take all of that away. It was a tremendous amount of work, but because of a state grant, and it just so happened that they extended the deadline for when the funds had to be expended because of COVID. And so we were able to utilize those funds to do that.
You couldn't pay me enough to have cleaned that.
Yeah.
No way.
Unfortunately, we see it all too often. We do see a number of these houses.
Yeah.
Laura,
Yes.
speaking of COVID funding, what's the status of the federal COVID funding that was allocated to the county?
So this morning at 9:45 was a county board meeting, and they decided a couple of things, that they would do a 45% to 55% split, with municipalities receiving the 45%. They determined that the application process would happen through the Kane County State's Attorney's Office. They are sticking with the per capita allocation that the committee is recommending, and they are in the process of finalizing the application documents. So I am waiting for official notice that of the deadline to apply, and instructions of which documents need to be completed.
Laura, this is Mark.
Yes.
I talked offline from the meeting last week and asked about the sidewalk crossings on the train tracks near Prairie and Wilson. I'm just following up just to kind of get it on the record as well, if you could take a look at that.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any others? Okay, then at this point, I think we will need a motion to go into executive session to discuss setting price of land for sale and purchase of real estate.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Callahan, and second by Beck. All those in favor?
Aye.
Well, well, roll call. We better do roll call.
Chanzit?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Barron?
Aye.
O'Brien?
Aye.
Callahan?
I already answered, but hi.
Weitzler?
Aye.
Ewer?
Aye.
McFadden?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Rosato?
Aye.
Beck?
Aye.
Knopp?
Aye.
Okay. We are now in executive session. If